If you want to understand how the KTM 450 Rally was born, you first have to look at the storm that hit Dakar racing in the late 2000s. For nearly a decade, KTM owned the desert. Their big-bore 660 and 690 rally machines were purpose-built to crush Dakar stages, while most other brands, Honda, Yamaha, BMW, were trying to adapt their 450 enduro or motocross bikes. That left the Austrians in a league of their own. If you were on a KTM, you had the best tool for the job. If you weren't, you were starting with a handicap. That imbalance didn't sit well with everyone. Around the paddock, whispers turned into action. Riders like David Casteau and Chaleco Lopez helped circulate a petition calling for an engine cap at 450 cubic centimeters. The idea was simple: level the playing field, bring the Japanese brands back into the fight, and end KTM's reign of oversized dominance. Then came the bombshell. In 2009, ASO, the French organization that runs the Dakar, announced that, beginning in 2010, any motorcycle over 450 cubic centimeters would be banned. Teams and riders were given just 6 months to comply. To put that in perspective, building and testing a rally bike normally takes a year or more. For a factory, it was brutal. For privateers, who mortgaged homes and burned savings just to make the start line, it was suicide. KTM's response was swift and dramatic. They accused ASO of moving the goalposts and declared they were withdrawing from Dakar permanently. The shock rippled through the sport. Fans, privateers, even rival teams were left wondering what Dakar would be without the Orange Army. Within days, ASO backpedaled. Privateers could still run their 690s, but only with a restrictor plate to cut power. Elite riders, however, would have to comply with the new 450 cubic centimeter rules. And so, in 2010, while there was no official KTM factory squad on the grid, their top stars, Marc Coma and Cyril Desprez, still lined up. Backed by sponsors like Red Bull and Repsol, they carried the fight on KTM machines, setting the stage for a whole new era. When the dust settled from the controversy, KTM faced a choice: walk away from Dakar entirely or start from scratch on a 450. For a company that had invested so heavily in the race, the decision was painful, but also obvious. They weren't about to let the sport slip away. So instead of leaning on the old big-bore 694s, KTM engineers rolled up their sleeves and began developing a brand new platform, a machine designed from day one around the new displacement limit. This was the seed of the KTM 450 Rally. And here's the key point: KTM's success at Dakar had never been only about bigger engines. Yes, the 690 made monster power, but what really gave KTM its edge was the years of hard-won knowledge behind it. By the late 2000s, the Austrians understood rally racing better than anyone. Chassis geometry for stability in endless sand, cooling systems that could survive blistering heat, and serviceability that meant a rider could swap parts in minutes under pressure. All of that R&D didn't vanish with a new rule book. It carried over into the 450 project. In fact, the regulation meant to end KTM's dominance ended up sharpening it. While other manufacturers scrambled to adapt their motocross or enduro machines, KTM was building something truly bespoke, another rally thoroughbred. The 450 cubic centimeter rule was supposed to reset the playing field. Instead, it opened the door to a new chapter of orange dominance, one that would make the 450 Rally not just a contender, but the most successful motorcycle in Dakar history. What made the KTM 450 Rally so special wasn't just that it met the new rules. It was how purpose-built it really was. Unlike Honda, Yamaha, or BMW, who tried to stretch their enduro or motocross platforms into rally machines, KTM built something entirely its own. The 450 Rally was designed from the frame up with one single goal: conquer Dakar. Let's start with the chassis. KTM didn't just repurpose an EXC dirt bike frame. They engineered a bespoke trellis design, closer in spirit to their big adventure models than to anything in the enduro lineup. Why? Because rally racing isn't about carving tight woods or blasting short motocross sprints. It's about stability, when you're wide open across hundreds of miles of desert. To reinforce that idea, they also lengthened the swing arm. That sacrificed a little nimbleness in tight corners, but it gave riders something far more valuable: stability at 70, 80, even 90 miles an hour. As Dakar legend Toby Price once said, "I'd rather crash in a corner at 30 than at 120. The suspension followed the same philosophy. At the front, KTM fitted massive 52mm cone valve forks, paired with a top-of-the-line rear shock. Together, they gave the 450 Rally the ability to float at speed, gliding over rocks, ruts, and endless dunes, while keeping the rider in control day after day. Then there's the heart of the bike, that 450 cubic centimeter single-cylinder engine. Born from KTM's motocross units but reworked for endurance, it was given a bigger oil capacity, 1.9 liters instead of the usual 1.2, plus a dedicated oil cooler. The gearbox was beefed up with hardened internals for durability. The result was roughly 74 to 75 horsepower, a staggering number for a thumper. More impressive, though, was the reliability. This engine could hold those revs across more than 6,000 miles of racing without a rebuild. Cooling was critical, too. Early versions used one large radiator, but KTM soon shifted to a split design like their EXC Enduros, improving efficiency and serviceability in brutal heat. And then came the clever touches. The skid plate, for example, wasn't just a guard. Made of carbon fiber, it shielded the engine, frame, and side-mounted fuel tanks while doubling as a toolbox compartment. In the past, it even housed a 3-liter water reserve to meet FIM rules. The navigation tower, also carbon, was built light and strong to reduce fatigue. Electronics played their role as well. Dakar imposes strict speed limits in certain zones, so KTM fitted not one but two limiters, a 100-mile-per-hour cap for open stages, plus a selectable system tied to each gear, 30 miles per hour in first, 50 in second, and so on, helping riders avoid costly penalties. Fuel strategy was another masterpiece. The 450 Rally carried 3 tanks, 2 up front for balance, and 1 in the rear that doubled as part of the subframe. Dual fuel pumps gave redundancy, and riders could switch on the fly which tank to drain. That meant they could keep weight off the front in soft sand or shift balance rearward on technical ground. Finally, KTM knew Dakar riders often had to be their own mechanics, so they made service fast. Removing a front tank, 3 bolts, dropping the skid plate, just 2. Every detail was designed for quick repairs in the desert, where time is always against you. In short, the KTM 450 Rally wasn't just compliant with the new rules. It was a purpose-built rally weapon, engineered to run hard, stay stable, and survive the toughest race on Earth. When the KTM 450 Rally finally hit the desert, the results were immediate and devastating. In 2011, its very first year, Cyril Desprez and Mark Coma went 1-2 on the new machine, finishing an hour and 40 minutes ahead of the nearest rival manufacturer. That wasn't just a win, it was a statement. The era of the 450 had begun, and KTM was already on top. The next year, 2012, brought a refined version of the bike. Once again, Desprez and Coma locked out the top 2 steps of the podium. Even more telling, 8 of the top 10 finishers were riding orange. If you were in the Dakar bivouac that year, it felt less like a competition and more like a KTM showcase. By 2014, KTM unveiled a major redesign of the 450 Rally, slimmer, lighter, and more agile, perfectly tuned to its displacement. Mark Coma rode it to yet another victory, and the new bike proved it wasn't just an adaptation of the old 690 era, but a purpose-built weapon that fully owned the 450 rule set. The pattern only intensified. In 2016, 2017, and 2019, KTM didn't just win, they swept the entire podium. 3 riders, all on 450 rally machines, standing shoulder to shoulder while everyone else scrambled for scraps. From 2011 through 2019, KTM won 9 straight Dakars. It was the kind of dominance usually reserved for legends in other sports, like the Yankees in baseball's golden years or the Celtics of the NBA. But in 2020, the streak finally broke. Ricky Brabeck, aboard a Honda, ended KTM's run with a strategy built around depth. A larger squad of factory riders, each pushing flat out every single day. Dakar had shifted from a marathon of attrition to a sprint of consistency, and Honda's approach paid off. Still, KTM wasn't done. In 2022, Sam Sunderland brought victory home on a gas, a machine that, beneath the red paint, was effectively a KTM 450 rally. And in 2023, Kevin Benavides won one of the tightest Dakars in history, beating teammate Toby Price by just 43 seconds after nearly 5,000 miles of racing. By 2025, KTM had already rolled out the latest rally replica for privateers, boasting a new engine, updated chassis, and fresh bodywork. Even after decades of success, the 450 rally continued to evolve, proving that KTM wasn't content to rest on its laurels. One of the cleverest moves KTM ever made wasn't just about winning factory titles. It was about making sure the privateers, the lifeblood of Dakar, stayed in orange as well. To do that, they introduced the KTM Rally Replica, a limited production version of the 450 Rally that any serious rider could buy. Each year, KTM built around 100 of these machines, essentially selling a factory bike for sale to the public. But buying the replica wasn't just about the motorcycle, it was a ticket into KTM's ecosystem. Every rider who purchased one gained access to the official KTM parts truck during Dakar. That might sound small, but in the desert, it's life or death. Imagine you're riding a bespoke Yamaha or Honda. Break a critical part, and your race might be over because there's no spare within 1,000 miles. But on a KTM, you could walk over to the orange truck, hand over cash, and get exactly what you needed. That kind of support kept countless riders in the race. The result was striking. Year after year, roughly 70% of the Dakar motorcycle field rode KTMs. It wasn't just dominance at the top, it was dominance throughout the entire grid. And the bikes themselves? The replica wasn't far off from the factory machines. Sure, it had a slightly smaller fork, 48 millimeters instead of 52, and gave up maybe 5 horsepower. But in every other respect, it was built to the same exacting standard. To most riders, it felt like owning the real thing. Of course, that kind of engineering came at a price. A new replica would set you back more than 30,000 euros, well over $30,000 in American money, and the parts weren't any cheaper. A piston ran about $1,350, a carbon skid plate nearly $950, a swing arm component around $1,200, and a carbon tower $1,600 before you even added lights or brackets. For some, the numbers were eye-watering. But then again, you weren't buying a dirt bike. You were buying a machine built to cross the Sahara at full throttle and survive. It was a strategy that locked riders into KTM's orbit, and it worked. The replica program made sure that when Dakar's dust settled, the bivouac was painted orange from top to bottom. In the end, the very rule that was supposed to end KTM's dominance only made it stronger. The 450 cubic centimeter limit was designed to level the playing field, to bring Honda, Yamaha, and others back into contention. But instead, it forced KTM to double down, to build a new machine from the ground up, carrying forward all the knowledge they had earned with the 660 and 690. What emerged wasn't a weaker bike, it was the KTM 450 Rally, the most dominant motorcycle Dakar has ever seen. KTM's success wasn't just about horsepower or frames or fuel tanks, it was about commitment. While other manufacturers dabbled in rally racing, KTM invested relentlessly, pouring resources into R&D, refining their machines year after year, and creating a support ecosystem through the Rally Replica program that kept privateers in the fight. Factory stars stood on the podium, but thousands of amateurs survived the desert thanks to the same orange lifeline. The result speaks for itself. Nearly 2 decades of near-total control, countless podium sweeps, and a machine that became more than just a motorcycle. The KTM 450 Rally is a symbol of persistence, of engineering excellence, and of how a company can shape an entire sport when it believes in it fully. And that leaves us with a question. What do you remember most about KTM's years of dominance? Was it the endless 1-2 victories, the sea of orange in the bivouac, or the drama of Honda finally breaking the streak? Share your memories in the comments. We'd love to hear your stories. Because in the end, Dakar is more than just a race. It's a legacy, and the KTM 450 Rally wrote one of the greatest chapters of all time.